So let's complete the get flow by going to the Visual Studio Code, and over here what we'll be doing is we need to fetch the data on the load of the customer component, right? So we'll go to the customer component.ts file, and we'll be just mentioning what we want to do in ng on init. Over here we want to get the data. So let me create a separate function similar to the one that we had done in inventory component. We are going to get the customer details, and this function we'll be calling over here. Now here we need to specify which particular URL we want to call for getting the customer details. So we'll just take the API URL from here. After mentioning the URL, what I need to do is have HTTP client mentioned over here. And we're going to inject HTTP client. So this we need to use in our function to call the get method, and we'll pass the URL. So we're subscribing to the method. Now when we are subscribing to the get method, we will need to assign an object with the result that we receive from the API. So let me just define an object. It's going to be customer details of type any. Now what I want is that once I receive the result from the API, this dot customer details should be assigned that result. Oh, I think we're good over here. Once we receive the data from the get method, we are assigning the customer details the same. Now in our customer.component.html, we already have static data that is there in the table. This will be just replaced with the dynamic data that we are receiving from the web API. So this is the static data over here. What I am doing is just defining a dynamic tr, and we are going to iterate through ng for let customer of customer details. This is the object that we created. Let me just take the help of the static data. And over here, as of now, I am removing all of the static values. And we're also removing the static rows that are there in the table. As of now, I'm keeping the bindings blank because let's just see which particular properties we'll be binding on the HTML page. So what I'm doing is just doing a console log of customer details, saving this, and over here also we'll save it. Okay, now let's just go to the browser. Currently you are able to see that on the browser all of the static data is removed from the table, and we'll just do an inspect and go to the console. So over here I'm getting an error also, can't bind ng4. Okay, so to remove this particular error, what we need to do is in our customer.component.ts we'll be importing common module. I'll save it, and then we'll go to the browser again. So you see that the error is removed, and now we are able to see that the records are there, but we are not seeing any value because we have not done the binding yet. But on the UI we are able to see number of rows that are there in the table, right? You see that edit and delete, these are static values. So 3 rows are generated in the table, but we are not able to see the values because currently we have not done the binding, right? And for the binding, what we need to see is which particular property we need to bind, because this is the value of customer details. We cannot have the camel casing done in the property. This property is starting with the capital C. So this is exactly what we need to bind, and that is why we have not done the binding yet. But now that we know that we don't need to use the customer details similar to this one, like we have done in the customer dialog box, we need to bind it directly to what we are receiving from the web API. So for that, what we'll do is, now we can come over here and just customer ID. So this is the value that we are binding from the backend. We are doing this for every column. Is going to be customer dot, and then we just check our browser. Then it is first name, last name, phone, registration date, and email, all starting with the capital letters. This is what we need to bind. Customer ID, customer name. And now over here in the customer name, what we are doing is we are giving the first name and last name together, so as to just concatenate and show it on the screen. Email, this is a very important thing that we just went through, to check which particular property you are binding. Is if we had just used the one that we had done in customer dialog box component, these were all with camel case because this is what we had defined over here, right? But we are not binding it as per the TS file. We are binding it whatever response we are receiving from the backend. And now the next is, I hope you have understood this particular concept properly. And now I'm just saving it, going to the browser again, and you see that we are able to see the data. Whatever data was there on the backend in the table, we are able to see it perfectly.